Hello and welcome to another edition of the Paranormal Concept Show, exclusive to the PA UK radio network. I'm your host Paul Rook, and as always we are joined in the studio by the amazing and stupendous Kerry Greenaway and Richard Clements. Hello guys.
Hello. Amazing
Hello.
and stupendous. Love
Absolutely.
it.
All those in one.
Yep, all rolled
What
into
more can
one.
you want?
Yeah, don't add any more to that list because I don't think I'd be able to remember it.
I can barely remember the station we're on.
No, what station are we on? PA UK. I got that
That's
right.
the one. He stumbled over that a little bit.
Yeah. I think he's got his teeth in now, so
Yeah.
I have.
all right.
Yep, I got those in definitely. Yeah. So how you been this week?
Yeah, fine.
Yeah, everything's been okay. Yes.
Have you been on many adventures this week, Richard?
No, I haven't. No. It rained today, actually. I mean, it's the only day
Yeah.
it's been sort of a bit sort of, up and down. But no, I haven't actually been on any adventures yet. I will be planning some. But
Awesome.
just wait for the weather to steady a bit more, and off I'll go.
Yeah, excellent. Cool.
Excuse me, off we go.
We go.
Yeah,
Yes.
off we go. Oh dear, funny. Okay, so this week's show, what are we delving into this week?
Well, last week we looked at battlefields, didn't we? We looked at
We did.
the concepts around that and hauntings and stuff like that. So it's a natural progression really that we talked about one of the presidents, didn't we? Washington.
Yes.
I
We
believe
did.
it
George
was.
Washington, wasn't it?
Yeah. So we're going to have a look. Oh my lord, I can't believe you've done this, Paul. This isn't even our country.
That doesn't matter, does it? It's paranormal.
Yeah, totally paranormal. Totally. But I would have thought, what about 10 Downing Street? Are there any ghosts of 10 Downing Street?
Yeah, but they're all boring, aren't they?
Are they?
Yeah, Conservatives and Labours. Past, yeah, boring.
Okay.
I thought the Americans would have something a little bit better.
Okay.
That's why we
What
went-
to offer. Okay.
So we're looking at the White House, really, aren't we? We're looking at ghosts of the White House and things
Yeah.
like that. All things White House. Now, it's one of the most famous addresses in America, the 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's right.
That's exactly where the Sylvanian family live, isn't it?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
Oh my God, it started already, guys. So I don't know, really. I don't know what to make of this. Is it haunted or is it just, I don't know. I don't know much about the area, to be fair.
No, I mean, I would have thought that particular area, I mean, associated maybe with the ancient Red Indians or
I don't know.
Native Americans. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah. 'Cause
Yeah,
I think the site the White House is situated, I think back in the day, and it was actually a swamp. So
maybe Bigfoot lives there.
who knows?
Oh, the Swamp Man. Anyway, It is one of the most famous addresses. Very iconic building, isn't it? It's like you don't need to be told what that building is when you see it.
Exactly. You look at it and go, "Oh, look, that looks like a White House."
To be fair, right? If you look at our 10 Downing Street, it's if you just had a picture of like the house, it's a house in a terrace, isn't it?
It's in the
Terrace
terrace.
But I
Terrace
think with
house.
us, with us, it's just the iconic black door with 10 on it, and people would instantly recognise it.
That's true, but it's not got quite the statement factor.
No, but
of the White House.
No, but if you took a picture of the window, it would just be a window. No one would recognise it. It's just recognisable by that black door.
Exactly. Whereas the White House, I mean, jeepers, it got blown up in the Independence Day. All I'm saying was best scene ever. Not because they blew the White House up, but just it was a really good scene. All I'm saying. Just loved that one. Just putting that out there. But it is packed full of ghosts and ghoulies of all sorts of things. So we're going to have a little look at that. So, right. The second president of the United States was between 1797 and 1801. And it was John Adams, right?
John Adams. Yep, that's correct.
I'm going to have to correct you there. He wasn't the first president.
I said second.
She said
president.
second.
Oh, did you? Sorry.
Pay
Yeah, let's
attention,
see.
Richard.
Not
even listening.
Jeepers. Oh my God, we started already. Trying to correct me.
Oh, right. Okay.
I did say second.
All right. Okay. Yeah.
You'd have to
My
listen back
bad.
to the
My
show.
bad.
Now they moved from Philadelphia to Washington DC. It was only a little town then,
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
right? And it was actually on the banks of the Potomac River.
Potomac. Yeah.
Yeah. Now the east room of this White House was the warmest and the driest. So, so John's wife Abigail used to hang her washing in there.
Perfect.
I
Yeah.
mean, like, you
Have
just
a
don't.
nice laundry going.
A nice little laundry room going, right? Now her ghost, good old Abigail Adams, she liked the White House so much she
She's still
decided
doing
to
the washing.
stay. Well, she's seen apparently in a cap and lace shawl, and she's allegedly seen heading towards that east room carrying laundry.
That's
Right.
awesome. Even in death, she's still doing the washing.
She's still doing her wifely duties. I would have thought when you get to that sort of level of presidency that the wife doesn't have to do the housework.
Oh, a young country back then. Yeah. Yeah. Give them
I don't
something
see.
to do.
Yeah, I don't see why not.
Okay. Well, not just that, but David Burns, yeah,
Yep.
Yeah.
he was the guy who sold the government most of the land on which the city of Washington was built.
Okay.
Right. Now, Lillian Rogers Parks, she was a seamstress. Now, she had a 30-year career, apparently, working at the White House. And in one of the memoirs, she told about a story of a valet who was who was the valet to President Roosevelt, sorry. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Heard a disembodied voice coming from the Oval Room saying, "I'm Mr. Burns." Now, that is just The Simpsons, surely.
Yeah.
It was either that or they've got something going on with Disco Inferno.
Now, apparently, during President Truman's administration, a guard heard something similar. He thought it was actually the then Secretary of State, God, I keep missing words out, Secretary of State, James Burns. He went looking for him, but that he hadn't been at the White House all day that day. So, but yeah,
Ooh.
two different accounts of the same phenomena.
Yeah, happening. Mm.
Yeah.
This is interesting to me because these are like tales that are being sort of like gathered together about these White House ghosts, but none of it's verifiable.
No, it's the same with any ghost story, really, isn't
It's
it?
a just good old ghost story, right?
Yeah.
So let's just have a moment, shall we, and talk about the good old ghost story. Where do they start, do you think?
Well,
I think they start for multiple reasons, don't they? I mean, going back to like smuggler days, and if smugglers wanted people to keep away, they come up with a local legend, ghost story, even like the Black Shuck stories, and things like that to try and discourage people from going. I mean, this day and age, you say something like that, and you get 50,000 ghost hunters all converging on the area. So it's sort of pointless.
A little bit different now.
Yeah, but again, it's something like camp stories. We're sitting around a campfire. People
But
like
this
to
is
be
a bit
scared.
different. Yeah, but this is a little bit different, isn't it? Because this is coming out of a very iconic building that's very important in regards to the political landscape of America.
Mhm.
The machinations, I suppose, is the word of that particular country. And there's no reason to have that thrill factor, the ghost story. They're not going to get the ghost hunters because they can't, right? Because security.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
They get a bit cross. You know what I mean? So why do they get these stories coming out? I mean, that one we've just read about came actually from the memoirs of a seamstress.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of them. And then obviously somebody who worked there, one of the guards, had heard a similar story. So there's two accounts of the same phenomena coming from people that work at the White House. Now, is it to raise their own standing. Like just being a seamstress isn't enough, but I heard a ghost.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Make them more
Could be.
notorious, do you feel?
Could be.
More 15 minutes of fame.
Or with Mrs. Adams, you know, she was always sort of doing the laundry and hanging it up in the East Room. And while she was alive, the people probably goes, oh, she'll probably still be doing that when she's dead. And that's how the sort of story developed, you know.
Yeah, so it's not actually, I mean, we didn't actually find any witness statements regarding that particular ghost of Abigail Adams. That was just like she's alleged to do that. So it could, you're right, Richard, it could be just like that. It started while she was doing it and just sort of like carried on after death. Whereas the other one about the ghost, Mr. Burns's ghost, now, bearing in mind, he wasn't a president. He was just the person who sold the land to the government. You know what I mean? Obviously, at the time when he was around, a very influential character and landowner in that particular area. So he was obviously an outstanding member of the community who owned all the land and was rich because he sold it all to various people.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So when you think about it, he shouldn't really be haunting the White House. Not really. It was a piece of land to him. It wasn't the White House.
Yeah.
Well, you can imagine the staff going round and sort of having a bit of a laugh with all the young recruits and interns saying, "Oh, and have you heard the ghost of Mr. Burns? You know, he's still keeping an eye on his land."
Who knows? Right, should we throw another one into the mix?
Yeah, come on.
We've got quite a few to go.
We have. In 1824, Andrew Old Hickory Jackson was defeated by John Quincy Adams. Right, now, this was one of the most contentious presidential elections in history. Now, an elected president has 4 years, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's their term of office. That's the same in the UK, isn't it?
Yeah, but you can get voted back in. But in the United States, you can only serve now, I believe, not back in the day, but now you can only serve 2 terms as president.
Oh, okay. So could back into day, was it only 1?
No, you can serve as many terms as you were voted in for. I mean, President Roosevelt served 3 times as president, but they changed it after that.
Right, let's see. Now, Jackson continued to hold grudges, right, against those who had supported Adams.
Right.
Okay. Now, in the early 1860s, Mary Todd Lincoln, which is a very famous, we'll get onto her, I'm sure, later on in the show. She used to hold seances in the White House. Right.
Yeah,
now, Abraham Lincoln was alleged to have attended a couple of those, but it was just Mary that would do most of that. Now, she liked to commune with spirit, as you do.
Yep. Well, that's the whole reason for it, isn't it? Really.
Well, and she allegedly heard Jackson stomping and swearing through the halls of the presidential residence. The Rose Room, which was Jackson's bedchamber when he was president, is believed to be the most haunted room in the White House.
Ooh.
Now, he hasn't just showed up there, right? He showed up as the ghostly presence of Jackson, this is. Now, this goes back to 1945 when Harry Truman was the 33rd president, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, Truman actually wrote to his wife Bess, right?
Yeah.
That he had encountered this ghost.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I sit here in this old house and work on foreign affairs, read reports and work on speeches, all the while listening to the ghosts walk up and down the hallway and even right in here in the study. The floors pop and the drapes move back and forth, and I can just imagine old Andy Jackson and Teddy Roosevelt having an argument over Franklin Roosevelt. You can imagine him just sitting there doing his work of an evening. And I mean, these buildings are, these old ancient buildings, they do pop and crack and move, right?
Oh, of course they do.
Yeah,
So-
of course they do.
Could that just be what's going on there? Drafty, I'd imagine it's
Yeah,
probably quite drafty as well.
Especially if it's built on a swampland. Yeah,
That's
I'm
what I was
surprised it
thinking.
hasn't. I'm surprised it hasn't sunk or fallen over at least.
It's a really sturdy building these days.
Yeah.
Okay. The most common ghost in the White House, though, is the ghost of Abraham Lincoln. Now, obviously, he was killed, wasn't he? His
Yeah.
term was cut short because he was
Yeah, it was assassinated. Yeah.
in 1865. Now, or the wife, should I say, of President Calvin Coolidge. Wives, nutty bunch, really, aren't we? When you think about it. Oh God, she was the first person to actually say she had seen Lincoln's ghost. Right. So according to her, Lincoln was standing looking out of a window of the Oval Office across the Potomac to the former Civil War battlefields beyond.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was stood at a window. So she saw him standing at the window looking out. Right. Now that's quite relevant because obviously he was involved in the Civil Wars, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very famous.
It was him.
Yeah.
Now, Lady Bird Johnson, obviously the wife of President Lyndon Johnson, said that she felt Lincoln's presence one night while watching a television program about his death. I wonder if it was that film.
Yeah. What film?
The Nicolas Cage film.
I very much doubt it.
That probably wasn't the right time period, was it?
No.
No, probably not. Now, sightings of Lincoln's ghost have been reported during, Roosevelt's presidency. Now, that presidency was a great time of upheaval in American history. And First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt used the Lincoln bedroom as her study. Now, she would feel so they changed the rooms for purpose then.
Well, back then, you moved into the White House, and it was usually the First Lady. They would set about, doing what women do, move things around and stuff like that.
I fancy that room for my bedroom, everybody.
I bet you that the president was going around for the first few months going, "Believe now, where is this pen? Where did I leave this pen?" And she's like, "Oh, I moved it. It's over here. See it on the side." That's another one, isn't it? On the side.
Just on the side. Yeah, most people though, like most residencies now, you would have certain, the libraries in a certain room and the Oval Office, obviously, the Oval Office. But the bedrooms you'd think would stay as they were.
Yeah, but no, they used to move them around.
Okay, well, Roosevelt used the Lincoln bedroom as her study, and she said she would feel his presence when she worked there late at night. Now, Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands heard a knock on her bedroom door in the night. She answered it, as she would, and she saw, allegedly, Lincoln's ghost wearing his top hat and fainted. She fainted, not the ghost, obviously.
Okay.
Right? And our very own Prime Minister, Mr. Winston Churchill, visited the White House quite often, actually, during World War II. And he told a story of he was naked coming from his bath, he was quite a character. He liked his bath, right, in the evening.
He did.
He would have his cigar, Winston Churchill with his little cigar. It's like little cigar. It's not exactly little, was it?
Pretty big.
And he would find Lincoln sitting in the fireplace in his room, sitting by the fireplace in his room, rather, not in the fireplace.
It'd be like, what are you doing in the fireplace?
Sorry, everybody. Brain's not quite set tonight. My brain's a little bit scrabbled at the moment. I'm not going to lie.
He was just in that general vicinity.
He was in the vicinity, yeah. Now, Lillian Rogers Parks, another seamstress, once investigated the sound of someone pacing an upper level of the White House. Staff member told her the room in question had been unoccupied, and that was old Abe just pacing the floor.
Oh.
Psychics have speculated that Lincoln's spirit remains in the White House to be on hand in times of crisis, right? As you do. Because he doesn't feel that his work was completed upon his death. Which kind of makes sense, right? Because he was very right. When we say Abraham Lincoln, what do we what do we imagine we're thinking? I see him as a very serious man with a very set purpose.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
he guided the country through its most dramatic part in history during the American Civil War. Plus, he will be forever known for emancipating the slaves.
Hmm. And they didn't finish that work, did he, before he was assassinated?
Well, it was all a work in progress. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I just think Abraham Lincoln, vampire hunter.
Oh my lord. Really?
You asked.
I didn't actually. Not in that capacity, Paul. I mean, like, as a character. Well, I
Yeah,
suppose that was a character if he was
yeah,
a
of course he
vampire
was.
hunter.
Ah,
Okay.
touche.
Whatever. Whatever. Touche.
Yeah.
Gosh, what are you on tonight?
Mm.
The juice? Oh, jeepers.
Do you want some?
I think I might. Haven't done a drunk show for a long time.
We don't do drunk shows. We're professionals.
Not now, we don't.
We jump over cars and all sorts.
That might have to change, folks. anyway, right. So let's go back to Abraham Lincoln.
Yes.
So what was I saying? Yes, he hasn't finished his work, has he? He's still sort of like doing his work, even though the tasks he had in his presidency even, they're done and resolved and gone.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going on, he must know that if he's lingering around the White House that's been done, why would you still linger?
Well, because he was assassinated, wasn't he? So maybe he just didn't realise that he'd passed because it was such a traumatic experience, and maybe he just feels that his work's unfinished.
Maybe he does.
Mm.
Now, the first ladies of the actual White House are a little bit controversial at times because First Lady Marnie Eisenhower,
Mm-hmm.
she first introduced a 1950s luncheon. She had the state floor reception rooms decorated with paper and cardboard witches, black cats and skeletons, cornstalks and pumpkins for Halloween.
Oh, right.
Perfect.
I would love to have seen that.
That must have been quite fun, yeah.
I bet that was absolutely awesome.
Yeah.
Now, basically, it's funny, isn't it? Because the role of the First Lady, as they call her, it's a strange one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, nowadays, yeah, it's quite sort of up front these days, isn't it? I mean, I don't know what it was back in the day. I think the First Lady just would have been in the background, but nowadays it's quite a position to hold, isn't it?
It certainly is. Now, when you think about Jane Pierce, right, this is the wife of Franklin Pierce. He was elected president in 1852. Yeah. Now, she sent letters to her family members, and she would fixate on illness, debility, death, all the happy, all the happy subjects. Her two youngest sons did die. And then after that, she did have a very morose outlook on life. And she lived in she basically was depressed, permanent state of depression after the death of her 11-year-old son, Benny.
Right, yeah.
Okay, and basically that happened just after her husband was elected.
Right.
Now, what had happened was the boy and his parents were travelling by train to Massachusetts when their car, the rail car that is, overturned into an embankment. Now, all the passengers were thrown from their seats, but unfortunately, the son was killed.
Right.
It was instant, folks.
Mm-hmm.
Now, she saw this. She saw her son in that condition, and that stayed with her throughout the rest of her life.
Mm.
She just couldn't cope with the loss and guilt of that. Why did they survive and she didn't, her son didn't, and whatnot. But what this did was that drove her to try to contact her dead son and beg him for forgiveness, basically, for not giving him everything she had when he was actually alive. Which you do, to be fair, I think it's just mother's guilt, isn't it? She probably did, but she just, she just felt that she didn't. Now, her first or initial effort to contact Benny, she wrote a letter to him, asking him to come to her so she could explain what her perceived failings as a mother. Right? But kind of didn't really have the effect she wanted to. So she then started to invite spiritualists in. So she had the Fox sisters in to see if they could reach Benny.
Right.
Now, she did kind of get a response, believe it or not, because it wasn't in the way you would imagine, though. But she dreamt of him. She dreamt of her son two nights in a row. She dreamt of him, and it, I suppose, brought her some form of comfort. Yeah, that's it. But that's interesting, isn't it? So when we talk manifestations, in regards to, you can manifest, we've talked about it with The Secret, haven't we? Manifestation, rights and stuff like that. This is like occult work. This is like spiritualist work. This is belief in spirit, that they will come and you can resolve issues or whatever it is, that you can do that. Now, what do we think of this? Do we think that she's manifested it through her actions of an intention letter and then obviously the Fox sisters spiritualism coming through, or do we think it was her obsessive focus on needing to contact him as to why her subconscious brought the dream 2 nights running for her?
It's probably the latter. I mean, the dream state is a very funny sort of area to go into. I mean, do the dead contact you through your dreams? I mean, we don't know. We simply just don't know. I mean, and dreams for me are just your subconscious sort of having a bit of a wander around whilst you're asleep.
A wander around.
Yeah, just have a wander.
Going to all the dark recesses of your mind, I mean, we've all dreamt about people that friends or sort of family members that have passed, but whether it's them actually making contact is sort of, it's, I don't think you can rely on it.
No, but to be fair, Rich, you don't think you can rely on anything spiritual?
No, that's right. Yeah.
It's all in the mind.
You know what I mean? I pull a tarot card a day or whatever, and you're like, oh, roll the eyes. What does that mean? Well, it means this. And you're like, yeah, all right, well, we'll see what happens, shall we? Kind of scenario. You're quite cynical in regards to that. At the end of the day, whatever it is, whether it's see, the problem is that I have with that is trauma. When you go through a trauma, your mind will tend to block it.
Yeah.
Okay, so you kind of don't dream, or your dreams don't focus on that event because it's almost like it buries it. It's like, oh, I can't face that. That's not going to happen. Yeah. So she was so traumatized by the death of her son that it probably wasn't likely that he would pop up in her dreams. Until she does this work, and then then it does happen 2 nights in a row, and she got some closure from that.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you can get closure from that, and if that helps, yeah, I mean, and who are we to say no? It's not what it is.
I think with anything like that, you kind of probably have to just take it at like face value. Yeah. Just take it it is what it is. Take it for what it is. Do you know what I mean? And accept it without trying to find out where did that come from, or was that spirit, or was it? Because you could drive yourself crazy with just on that facet of, was that just me who made that happen, or was that spirit visiting me? But if you got closure from that experience or that dream in her case, do you know what I mean? Then just take it for what it is and accept it, and accept that comfort that brought you.
Yeah,
so it's one of those, isn't it? You're probably right. It's probably just your subconscious that's giving you that it's almost like your brain's giving you that little gift just to help you
Yeah.
have that relief and comfort.
Mm.
But maybe, just maybe, it could well be. Now, Jane, unfortunately, did share the experience of losing the young child with Mary Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Mary Lincoln had actually suffered a young son as well before becoming First Lady. God, they're not very careful with their sons, are they? Now, that was a bit wrong of me. I do apologise, everybody. In 1862, I've got a dark humour at the moment. It may come out occasionally. In 1862, her husband obviously led the Union during the Civil War. She watched helplessly as her son Willie died of typhoid fever. Now, there wasn't a lot of sympathy for her because they said she's a privilege. She's very privileged,
Mm-hmm.
right? So at least she had the chance to be with her son while he was going through that illness and death. A lot of the nation's mothers weren't. Their sons were
Well,
shipped
yeah.
off to war and they died on a battlefield, and they didn't even get to know sometimes if
Mhm.
their sons had died. So at the time, poor old Abraham Lincoln's wife was nursing her son while he died. So, and public sympathy wasn't with her.
Mm.
And that
Well-
was, disquieting for her, I would
Mm.
imagine. And
Well, it would have
not
been,
forgetting the
but
trauma of the death as well.
well,
Yeah.
it would have been, but the country was going through a mass upheaval anyway, and sort of like the general public would, probably would have sort of turned around and said, "Well, you've got to do what we do and just get on with it."
Yeah.
Mm.
Suck it up, put your big girl
Mm.
pants on, love.
Yeah.
But I think what's missing from this is it's a bit. Yes, she was there and watched him go through it, but it weren't just her son. There's two people who make a child. The
Mhm.
president's trying to deal with the war he's involved in and that side of it. He's lost a son too.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, she kind of dealt with it in the same way that Jane Pierce did.
Mhm.
She began to talk to mediums. She attended like seance circles. She invited Nettie Colburn Maynard, William Shockle, and another one who's only recorded as the Colchester of Georgetown, basically to come to the White House and hold seances.
Yeah.
Right, calls to the dead, they call them. Now, we know that President Lincoln was actually in attendance at least one of them. Now, Laurie was apparently the most successful in contacting the dead son, and he was permitted to become intimate enough with her to use clairvoyance.
Mhm.
Cool.
Now, he said that there were enemies around her who must be replaced. So, Mary Lincoln was actually quite politically minded as well. I think you would have to be if your husband's like the president,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? Now, she used this to sense that the Treasury Secretary Salmon Chase was actually being disloyal to the president.
Mm. Could just
How
be a
much?
coincidence.
How much influence did the spiritualism have on politics at that time is probably something we'll never know the depth of, but I think it did have an influence.
Yeah.
Now, we know that Jane Pierce's son came to her in her dreams. Now, Mary Lincoln says that her son actually manifested in a ghost form, like as a spirit.
Hmm.
And she wrote to her sister, Emily, about Willie. She said, "He comes to me every night and stands at the foot of my bed with the same sweet, adorable smile he has always had. He does not always come alone. Little Edie is sometimes with him."
Oh. So he brought his mate along as well.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Beautiful, right?
Yeah. Bless his little cottons.
Now, again, we've gone from, all right, so we've kind of like talked about the psychological in regard to dreams, but now Mary Todd Lincoln is actually saying he comes and stands at the end of the bed. He's actually a ghost form.
So
He's actually
yeah.
there. So
Yeah.
what do we make of that? Or is she just seeing what she wishes to see? Is
Yeah. I think
manifesting it?
I'd go with that, to be fair, because there is a lot of phenomenon going about where people are seen like the foot of the bed, I mean, look how many people we've interviewed, and we said, what got you into the paranormal? And they're like, well, when I was a kid, I see an apparition at the bottom of my bed. It's
True.
quite a common occurrence, so why not?
Do you think then, right, okay, so let's explore that concept. Now, at bedtime, yeah, you're winding down, aren't you? You've done your day's work, you're tired, you're at your least mentally charged.
Yeah.
You're not actively using your brain, you're just in a routine of getting yourself ready for bed. So in a funny kind of way, it's almost like a Zen moment, isn't it? You're in a routine, you're going to bed. It's like, I would imagine she had her own bedroom. I don't think she was sharing at this stage. So she's on her own, not talking to her other half at this time. And just in those quiet moments of routine and settling down for the night. And as I say, you're going to be tired. We do have phenomena that happens. Quite a lot of phenomena happens around that time between settling down and sleep. Different from sleep paralysis. That's once you've been asleep.
Well, we enter a state before we go to sleep. We go into like a hypnagogic sleep, which is literally you are awake and you are asleep at the same time, and your brain finds it very difficult to determine what's sort of real and what isn't. And I can see sort of like the apparition at the end of the bed is very common. And what's a very common aspect is something we all share when we go to sleep. Is this state we enter called hypnagogic sleep, and this can sort of produce the lighter side. It's not sleep paralysis per se, but you can sort of see things which actually aren't there.
Yeah.
It's that time where, for the listeners, to explain it a little more, like when you first drop off and then you jerk awake. Yeah, your body jolts, doesn't it? And you sort of like jolt back into awareness, we'll call it. Yeah. That reaction, they believe, they don't know why people do that. Yeah.
No, there are a lot of
various theories around it, but they don't actually know why the body does that to you. But it's that state where you're sort of like, you're not quite under, but you're right on that verge.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So if you get that jerk, you're sort of like in that sort of state.
I constantly do that.
Just before the jerk, that is. Yeah, I do it a lot as well.
Yeah.
I do it a lot. I normally get that more when I've got my anxiety, when my anxiety is peaking.
Yeah.
And I put that down to when my anxiety is probably at its highest, which, you both know I've gone through periods of high anxiety through my life. I think it's my body goes into a fight or flight when I'm in my anxious state. So when I go to sleep, it's not quite sure what it should do.
Yeah.
So it jerks me awake to go into my flight or fright kind of state again. And I'm like, no, I'm relaxing now. I'm safe. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's why I have it quite a lot through my anxious times, because it's my natural instinct of fight and flight playing around. It's not sure what to do about anything, so it does what it likes. So that wouldn't happen for everybody. That's just me personally. On my when I do that, but for other people it could be all sorts of different reasons as to why you jerk. They do think that it goes back to like when we were like almost the ethereal kind of when we was instinctual.
Oh, right.
And they think it's a kickback in our brain of evolution to that time. So
where you had to be alert when you're asleep and stuff like that. You look at, with pets and stuff, they always appear asleep, but you call them or you touch them and they will automatically wake up, won't they?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, cats are notorious for it.
Especially when you mention food.
Yeah. No, you're right. They'll open their eyes or they'll move or they'll do something, won't they? They're aware of the touch. You very rarely can you like touch an animal when it's asleep and it not react to it
Yeah.
in some way. Now, Mrs. Lincoln did believe it was authentic.
Mhm.
It was like it was her comfort. And she had a really strong belief in spiritualism, which I do too, in all honesty.
Yeah.
In many forms of like manifestation and stuff like that. So she reportedly joined a spiritualist commune when she took a trip to New England. She posed apparently for the famous spirit photographer William Mumler, who you've written about, haven't you?
Yes, yes, and that's a very famous photo, yeah, which allegedly shows her husband at her shoulder.
That's it. His hands are on her shoulders. It's a very famous photo. But what did we find out about William Mumler? Was he faking it?
Probably.
Faking it till he made it, everybody.
He faked it till he made it, yeah.
Obviously, she believed that was authentic, and given the nature of his death, that was a very sudden death for her. That obviously brought her a lot of comfort. She reportedly wrote to a friend, "A very slight veil separates us from the loved and lost. Though unseen by us, they are very near." Very much so. Now, where are we going next? Several first ladies really reported senses of spirit in the house, in the White House.
Well, they say women are more perceptive to it, don't they?
Well, of course we are.
Yeah, I was going to say, playing devil's advocate, maybe that could just be the word
The men
gullible.
are too fucking busy. Oh, sorry, I swore. I do apologise, everybody. That was a bit popped out, didn't it?
No, I was going to go
That
with
one
gullible,
came
but...
up, didn't it?
I do apologise. The men are a lot more busy, though, aren't they? They're running the country at the end of the day. The women are not really
just doing the washing.
going.
So
Yeah,
not
they're
very
doing the
much at all.
washing and playing around with seances and stuff.
Yeah, and doing the washing up and stuff.
Eleanor Roosevelt actually publicly stated that she did sense some type of. Now, she was very careful. She didn't use the word ghost. She said presence when she worked in her quarters. So she would not use the word ghost or spirit. She said presence. I love it. Absolutely brilliant. Okay, so by the First World War, we know that there was a huge rise in spiritualism, not just in the UK, but over in America as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that really kind of was a big hitting point, I think, for spiritualism. So why do we think spiritualism actually came out so strongly then? I think it's because so many people suddenly are far away from them that they needed some form of closure. They can't get closure in any other way than trying to contact them through the dead. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Across the void, as it were.
Well, that's right. And it's the only way you're sort of guaranteed to sort of get close to them. I mean, if seances work, that is, and that's if they're purported to do what they say they do. But you can't get it from the mainstream religion because they have to address the masses all the time. You go to church, and you get your vicar or your pastor. They just talk generally to the whole community. But with spiritualism and with seances, you can actually have a one-on-one sort of encounter, for want of a better word, a bit more one-on-one as opposed to being just swept up generally.
Yeah, I have to say, if you lost your son, father, whatever, in war away from you, you're going to want to talk to them. You're going to want that closure for yourself because you don't know what happened to them. You want to know that they're okay and they're at peace and that they're out of pain or suffering. That then, I have to say, I would say that that's a natural response.
Definitely.
For that need, you know what I mean, to have that. So that's why there was such a huge rise in spiritualistic practices during that time period. Now, obviously, regarding the White House, there was a huge influx of alleged sightings around that time, but there was 2 that were very obviously false. I mean, I can imagine them. This is where the waters get murky, I feel. When we hit this period, there was a lot of people faking it.
Yeah.
Making money off of the grief.
Making money out of grief. It's a very opportunistic sort of thing to be, isn't it, as well?
Unfortunately, yeah, cynically, it is unfortunate. But it does happen. But then obviously you would have people that have got talent. So, you know what I mean? Whatever way you want to look at it. Now, the first is Edith Wilson's plan to landscape the South Lawn. She was going to do that, but she was spooked by the ghost of Dolly Madison, who protested the change to what had been her old rose garden. Yeah, so she was like, "Don't touch my rose garden. You ain't touching my rose garden." And came as a ghost to stop her from doing it. It was not Dolly Madison who created the White House's rose garden, but rather the first Mrs. Wilson. So we can say that encounter is totally false, because that weren't the person who made the rose garden.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So is that a I want to say diagnosis, but that's not the right. That's not the word, is it?
No.
What's the word I'm searching for?
Misapprehension.
No, it's mistaken identity kind of thing, isn't
it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we also have a claim that Lou Hoover saw the ghost of Abigail Adams approaching the doors of that East Room, as you do, and where she used to hang her laundry. Yet it emerged years after that she'd actually hosted a wedding shower in there for one of her secretaries. Apparently, the party was repeated. It was recast as a secretive, ghoulish original. Now, it might be true. It might not be. Who knows? Do you know what I mean? Now, the Lillian Roger Parks, we spoke about her earlier in the show, she reported the unearthly cries of childbirth pain were heard in the West End in the second floor presidential family living quarters. Gosh, that's a thing. Now, this would have been before the Truman administration renovation. Fanciful tales state that Bess Truman had heard these cries, told her husband about them. Now, in letters, when she was back home in Missouri, the presidents believed the White House ghost of Andrew Lincoln, Teddy Roosevelt, and Lincoln were very evident. They elaborated the tales. So it was really he who declared the cries to be those of the ghost of Frances Cleveland, the only First Lady to give birth there. So it gets murky. That's what I'm trying to say with this. It all gets a bit murky. Who said what to who and who it was supposed to be, and actually that wasn't built at that time, but it was built at a different time, or so and so built that, but it didn't get built by that person. It got built by somebody else. So it all gets a little bit murky.
Yeah.
Because that ghost didn't have much time, because Frances Cleveland died in 1947, and the Trumans moved out months later, during the 1948 presidential campaign. So the renovation could begin. And they both actually met Frances Cleveland in Princeton when she was alive.
Yeah.
So the sounds that Truman is giving out is probably those of the old building structure giving out.
Yeah.
Rather than ghosts and ghoulies, right?
Yeah. Makes perfect sense to me.
The accounts, though, of one of the presidents are authentic because they've been made by women themselves. Yeah. Grace Coolidge confessed to once glimpsing the image of Abraham Lincoln standing by the window, right? Yeah.
Yep.
She actually said that in American Magazine. She reported that she thought it was looking across the river, right?
Yeah, she did, yeah.
Now, the room where Eleanor Roosevelt often worked, that was the private study of Lincoln, yeah? And that actually had a door that connected both places, a path that actually permitted the president to move around inconspicuously. Now Eleanor Roosevelt, this is, furnished the room with wood pieces made by Valkill factory.
Okay.
And it was working there late at night that she felt Lincoln's presence. Perhaps it was the power of suggestion.
I was about to say this power of suggestion because obviously being in that room, and if you hear or see anything that you can't explain, then you're going to get jump to that in conclusion anyway, aren't you?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Now, in 1961, Life magazine, Jacqueline Kennedy, beautiful Jacqueline Kennedy, said that whilst the president, the president she admired the most was actually Thomas Jefferson, but it was Lincoln that she actually felt the greatest affinity.
Mm.
Now, she used to sit alone quietly in the Lincoln bedroom, and she actually found that very comforting. In the craziness, I mean, the Kennedy presidency was, oh gosh, it was, I would say, one of the first media lovies kind of presidency.
Yeah.
He was the first of the modern presidents.
Yeah, and she was rolled up in that, and there was a lot of attention on both JFK and herself. I mean, she was gorgeous, wasn't she? She had such style, and she was so beautiful. And
so well before my time, so I don't know.
Well, before my time, darling, but I know she is.
I know she is. I've just seen pictures. Do they do them justice? I don't know.
I think they both had a air of charisma about them that not many people have. It's that X factor, isn't it? It's that you can't buy it, you can't act it. I've got it or you haven't. Yeah. So she would find comfort from these alleged spirit presences when she got overwhelmed by their life, just by being in their presence, really. But whether or not, maybe it was just, she just needed some time out. You're just sitting there. It's got, you know what I mean? I'm just going to sit here. It's just quiet in here. I like it. You know what I mean? It could just be that more than anything else.
Absolutely.
Now, by the 20th century, no longer needed spiritualists or mediums to contact the dead, right?
Yeah.
That was rather good, wasn't it?
Yeah, you can do it by phone now.
You can do it online.
Yeah. All these phone apps, wonderful things. You can do it by phone now. So, yeah, who needs mediums?
Well, this is true. God. Now, Hillary Clinton, let's talk Hillary. She, what's the word? She sought the inspiration, I suppose, of Eleanor Roosevelt. Yeah, now a psychologist studied theology and the human potential movement. Right, basically, you find out what makes you tick and utilize what makes you tick specifically to get what you want, basically. So you use your strengths and weaknesses in unison to get what you want, and it's a psychological thing that you can work with that makes you powerful and embodied and all that crap. Yeah. But she would, and I'm going to use the word loosely, channel the spirit of Eleanor Roosevelt, because that's who she was inspired by the most. And I don't mean channel as in sit there psychically, channel her, but she would take her as we've all got somebody we find quite iconic in that we aspire to be as good as.
Well, yeah. I mean, everyone does, don't they? We hope they will do.
Yeah, so someone you look up to.
Yeah. In the way that they held themselves and, were politically minded or whatever. Well, Hillary Clinton's was Eleanor Roosevelt. Okay. Right. Now, the two women were working together on a book project of the First Lady when Houston suggested that she had to imagine, so the psychologist and Hillary Clinton, right? So she suggested how she would imagine Mrs. Roosevelt and to emulate her. Right. And how she might react to anything, the challenges of the job, basically. How do you think Eleanor Roosevelt would act in this circumstance, and it's a way of channeling that hero worship kind of scenario.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, a lot of people, especially these days, they go on about what would Jesus do? Same sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly the same sort of thing. But the media learned of this, and actually, they said that she was channeling the ghost of Eleanor Roosevelt for conversations. That's not kind of how it works. That's not what she was doing. It was a psychological. I don't want to use the word experiment, but methodology. We'll go with methodology.
Yeah.
A psychological methodology to make you more comfortable in your role, which is it's a big role. First lady is a massive role, okay?
Absolutely.
So Hillary Clinton is actually very savvy. She's an incredibly savvy woman. I'm not going to get into politics, but as a person, she's actually quite savvy, right? She began to take the mick. If anybody asked her about it, if any of the press asked her about it, she was like, yeah. I've had a good old chat with Eleanor. That's what Eleanor has said. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And in a letter to former Defence Secretary Robert McNamara, she said, given the latest flap over my imaginary conversations with Mrs. R, I'll be sure to pass on your greetings the next time we talk. So she didn't get all funny about it. She just was like, yeah, all right, whatever, and took the mick out of people really for that. Now, Ouija boards. Let's just have a little chat about Ouija boards. What do we think about Ouija boards, people? Do we think that we can get messages from the dead from a Ouija board, or do we think that? What do we think?
Having used the Ouija board, they can either sort of send you a lot of gobbledygook, but sometimes you can actually get what appears to be sort of quite solid sort of testimony or evidence from them. So I'm a bit up in the air with Ouija boards. I mean, I do use them. So
Paul?
Yeah, again, as Richard says, sometimes 9 times out of 10 you do get complete rubbish through them. But there are times, I've used the board in particular, where we've got certain information and it's led to a good solid research in names, dates, places, even items that they could be connected to. And the last time I went somewhere, they described a pocket watch, and we actually found that pocket watch, and it had the inscription. They said whether or not that was genuine or whether or not it was one of the team members picked it up. It's a good experiment, definitely. And I'm actually working on a new Ouija board.
You're doing the mixed up letter one, aren't you?
Yeah, I've actually commissioned it now. Someone's making it for me.
Cool.
Yeah.
So Mary Lincoln, she believed in the power of the Ouija board to foretell the future. Now the Ouija board actually came out as just like a parlor game, didn't it? And its reputation, I think, has kind of grown from film.
Definitely.
Yeah.
You open the portal to hell, and then you get a belief system set upon it and stuff like that. It's an interesting tool. I would say you protect yourself when you're on it. Do open and close properly. Even if it's bunkum, it's better to be safe than sorry, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, she used to use the Ouija board, Mary Lincoln, for all sorts of things. She used to use it quite extensively at times. And when President Lincoln went into one of his solemns and fearfuls and waking up from dreams from dark conclusions, he blamed the fact that she was using this Ouija board all the time. She dismissed it. She was like, "That was so stupid. It's only a board. Can't possibly affect you in that way."
Yeah.
But he didn't like it. But she would use it quite extensively.
He's obviously watched these horror films.
She didn't. of all the things that she did, right? Yeah. Of all the things that she did, she wasn't actually worried about the power of dreams.
Okay.
She didn't
Right.
hold a lot of faith in that, but she did a Ouija board or astrological influences, shall we say.
Hmm.
Funny, isn't it?
It is. It's interesting, isn't it?
It's funny how you believe in one thing but not in the other,
Hmm.
I would say.
Yeah. Just certainly keep an open mind.
Very much so. On that note, we're going to take a quick break
Cool.
Okay.
as we've done the first half of the show. We've come to the end of the first half of the show. And when we come back, we're going to continue down this little pathway and looking at various concepts surrounding some of the ghosts of the White House. Join us right back after this.
Hello, Harry Price here. If there's nothing me and my friends enjoy more here on the other side, it is to sit back and relax and listen to the Paranormal Concept Show, right here on the PAUK radio network. Broadcasting a plethora of interesting and informative content for all your paranormal needs. Find them across social media to keep up to date with forthcoming shows and all their other adventures. Hello, is there anybody there?
And welcome back to the Paranormal Concept Show, exclusive to the Paranormal UK radio network. Okay, so before the break, we were examining paranormal happenings, ghost stories, and actions of various people that have passed through those iconic hallways of the White House, weren't we, boys?
We sure was, yeah.
Okay, so it's not just like spirits and ghosties. There have actually been occasions where premonitions have happened in the White House as well.
I
Oh,
like
right.
good premonitions.
Yeah. 2 different wives have had premonitions about their husbands in danger.
Oh, okay.
Is that shortly after they took out the life insurance?
Maybe.
Yeah,
One
probably.
actually had an extrasensory experience that related to the death, or the potential death of a president that wasn't even her own husband.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
Right. Julia Gardiner Tyler, yeah,
Yep.
she was a former First Lady. She sponsored an evening of levitation, magnetic powers, and the conjuring up of spirits from the great beyond.
Cool. That
Gotta
sounds
love it,
good.
right? This sounds
You
real.
gotta love it.
This sounds more Victorian times to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
She watched as a slave seamstress. What is it with seamstresses in the White House? Levitated a table. She
See,
stated,
what it is, they need seamstresses because obviously when the president takes office, all they're doing is sitting behind a desk, writing and signing paperwork and stuff. So their backside sort of spread a bit, and every time they go bend down to pick their pens up, they split their trousers. So obviously they need the seamstresses to fix the trousers.
oh, is that what it is?
That's it, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Now, she watched this table be levitated, and she stated, instead of being terrified, I was very glad I witnessed what it is. Without a doubt, the magnetic influence of the body and not supernatural agency.
Ooh.
So she thought it was to do, again, from us, our magnetic power from the body.
Yeah.
There is an interesting experiment that I've seen done. I've seen it done in a nightclub of all places, where people lift a person that they couldn't possibly lift.
Oh, yeah. I know that one. Yeah.
Mm.
Now, I don't know what goes on. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like that one in there was a teen horror flick ages ago, The Faculty, I think it was called. And they did something like that where they put their fingers over someone, no, just
Yeah.
underneath them, and they just kept reciting over and over again. Was
Light
it?
as a feather.
Yeah, stiff as a board, light as a feather. And then as they were doing it, they were slowly lifting their hands up, so they would literally carry this person on one finger.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's the film, but that I should imagine that's sort of what they're.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
roughly what they do.
That's
Yeah.
roughly what you do. What I saw. Yeah. and they did lift the person. So is that, when we talk about that, is that a mind over matter thing? Is that just like you can walk on hot coals and we know it's a mindset?
Yeah.
It's your
So-
mind overcoming your body.
I know, again, medically, because I'm in the medical field, when your body releases adrenaline, when you're angry and things like that, it gives you extra boost in power. Maybe that's sort of what's happening with, you're trying to convince your body that you're stronger in some way to help release the endorphins that you need and the adrenaline to be
So
able
almost
to do
like a
that.
self-hypnosis type thing?
Yeah.
Because you're repeating the phrase over and over again, aren't you?
Yeah.
Which you do when you do coal walking. You repeat the phrase, cool as water, cool as water.
Yeah, cool as moss or something like that. Yeah.
Don't you?
I
And when you walk
think I'd be like, sod, this is hot.
the point is
Run.
that your mind overrides your body.
Yeah, and in that case, it would then could possibly release endorphins and adrenaline to give you your body that extra boost that it needs to do what it needs to do.
Yeah.
Mhm. Exactly. So and that's what she thought it was, the magnetic influence of the body. But she was actually one of the people that had a premonition of dream premonition. God. Yeah.
Yeah.
So one night she was actually at the James River plantation. She shared it with her husband, 7 children, and she was terrified of a dream she had of him. Now, he was now a former president, and he was serving in the Confederate House of Representatives. She actually imagined him in his room at the Richmond Exchange Hotel, unable to breathe and holding his necktie. She told several people about this, and decided she had to go to him, right? Just to make sure for her own peace of mind that he was actually all right. She made the trip to Richmond, relieved he was fine. She went home.
Yeah.
2 days later, he died exactly as she dreamed he would.
Ooh. Right.
Interesting.
That's weird.
That is, isn't it?
If that's a true account, that's a little strange, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, she actually, 27 years later, she was visiting Richmond, rented a suite at the Exchange Hotel, and then she died there that night as well.
Oh, right.
That was 27 years later.
Mm.
Now, primary source documents in the hand of the First Lady, Peggy Taylor, seem to have gone missing or obliterated. Yeah. However, she led a full, secluded life on the second floor of the White House during her husband's presidency. There are no notes or letters, and it's incredibly rare to get to find an autograph. Okay, but there is a direct quote that is attributed to her, and it was recorded by apparently a loyal family friend some years after her death. Now, she's supposed to have uttered when her husband, Zachary Taylor, heralded general of the Mexican War, was nominated for presidency. My God, guys, can't get my words out, jeepers. It is a plot to deprive me of his company and to shorten his life. That's what she was alleged to have said, but we've got nothing verified on that. We've only got the word of a loyal family friend.
Yeah.
Right? Now, she thought there was some kind of conspiracy to kill him, but she didn't say who. She just said she thought that there was.
Right.
Yeah.
16 months into his presidency, her prediction was correct. Because President Taylor died of a sudden stomach disorder in 1850.
Okay.
Now, Peggy was hysterical, right, at his deathbed. And how quickly it had happened as well. So she didn't believe it at first. She just couldn't get her head around it. Now, his corpse was actually placed on stay, preserved until the burial could take place. But 3 times she asked that he be taken off the ice so she could be certain he was dead.
Right.
Okay. just to make sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Funny that, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Mm. Now, Julia Dent not only believed that her husband Ulysses Grant would go on to enjoy a triumphant life of success and public acclaim, she also believed the audible yet invisible voice which assured her of this during their most dire days of struggle. So she really held the faith.
Well,
She did, didn't
yeah.
she? Yeah.
Yeah, but she said that there was an invisible voice telling her. Faith in that voice not only saved her husband's life, but actually changed the course of history. Just 6 days after her husband, by then the Union Army leader, had signed the peace treaty ending the Civil War, Julia Grant refused the invitation of the President and Mrs. Lincoln to join them on one of their many nights at the theatre. The reason went deeper than the rivalry between the women. Earlier that day, Mrs. Grant was seated in the back of her carriage, negotiating the muddy streets of Washington, when a man riding his horse in the opposite direction neared, looked into her vehicle, and just stared in, looking menacing.
Oh, right.
It really unsettled her.
So it's Jack the Ripper on holiday.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So, obviously she didn't go.
Hmm.
And what happened at that theatre?
Yes, the Ford Theatre, yeah. He was assassinated, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Now, Julia, made an effort to live in camp with her husband from the very first time he took charge of the Union Army. He'd received many death threats on his life. He never really came to anything, but he had many of them. And he managed to get through life on the battlefield as if protected. But the war is now over. Grant is becoming a bit of a celebrity. Julia insisted that this was his path, it was his fate. And everywhere he appeared, he was met by huge applause and cheers. He's well respected.
Yeah.
The masses loved him. Now, it would have been a temptation to go to the theatre full of admirers, right? With Lincoln,
absolutely.
all shouting for him. You can imagine that would have been a huge pull for him.
Yeah.
But she thought, because of this encounter with the menacing glance of the rider in the carriage, that she, that when they sort of like entered the presidential box, that there would be danger and must be avoided. So, they decided to spend some time with their children in New Jersey, and that was an acceptable reason for refusing the honour of being seated with President Lincoln on that night. They were already well on their way to New Jersey as the Lincolns arrived at the Ford Theatre to see the play Our American Cousins, and it was later learned that the conspirators who assassinated the president believed Grant was to have also been seen there and also would have been assassinated at the same time.
Yeah, it would have been a target as well, yeah.
So she was quite premonition-y, if that's a word, or am I making words up again? Maybe I'm making words up. Premonition-y. We'll go with that. Put that in the diary as another Kerryism.
Exchange it for prophetic, probably more.
All right. Well, no, I like what I said.
Oh, okay.
Now, Ida Mckinley, unfortunately, she was sort of distorted and made to look a bit caricaturish and a bit of an invalid who needed his perpetual protection. Now, William McKinley, who was a bit of a martyr, it won him votes on sentimentality. In truth, Ida McKinley, what this is, was very protective of him.
Oh, right.
During the Spanish-American War, he even stopped taking carriage rides and went without sleep. She conspired with his staff to remedy this because obviously the effect on his health was not good, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
So she conspired with the staff to sort of like do it. So at times, she panicked. He was tempting fate by his refusal to be guarded. He was quite presumptuous. He was quite arrogant and presumptuous, and kind of believed this is a god complex kind of scenario.
Yeah.
I feel.
Yeah, I think so.
He didn't believe anybody would want to harm him, even though loads of world leaders have been murdered.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And she used to consult astrological journals. So it was easy for her to become very agitated when she kind of came across articles that sort of predicted situations that her husband might be harmed.
Right.
Yet her premonition was before he became president. Now, on the night of his election victory, he was surrounded by jubilant friends and family. Several noticed how greatly distressed she was. Her friends told reporter Edna Coleman that they were satisfied she had a premonition of his fate. Now, embarrassed by a bit of a dark mood, Mckinley made light of it and said, "This little woman is always afraid someone is going to harm her husband." And she replied in front of all of these people that, "Oh, Major, they will kill you. They will kill you." Ooh.
The plot
History,
thickens.
basically, history writes Ida as behaving with irrational demands on her husband's time. And these dates from accounts during the period he was planning to run for a second term. So he'd done his first term without no harm, was going to go for a second term, and she kind of was kicking off big time. She was really argumentative about it, didn't want him to do it. And whenever he was like trying to talk to her about it, she was very hostile about it. She said, "Look, you're tempting fate by going for a second term." She couldn't accept his decision. And, you know, it was one of those, she had to just get on with it, basically.
Yeah.
However, as the first summer of his second term sort of waned, it was coming to an end, Ida McKinney prepared to leave the restful presidency of their home in Canton, Ohio, journey with the president for his anticipated visit to the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, and her premonitions returned. So she'd settled down, and then they returned with a sort of like
Vengeance.
Turn with a vengeance, yeah.
Yeah. Her nurse admitted to the press at the time it was strange just how intensely Mrs. McKinley objected and gave, you know, "Don't go to the exhibition, don't go to the exposition." What's that word? Exposition.
Expedition.
Expedition.
What that says.
Exhibition.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
She didn't want him to go. But she couldn't give him a reason.
Yeah.
Now, there are a few examples of her handwriting, some lines she scribbled in 1901 diary book. So we have got writing of hers, but she sensed this situation strongly enough that she felt she had to record her feelings. And in her diary, she wrote, "I wish we were not going away from home." That could just be she'd enjoyed her time at home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the president, Mrs. McKinley, did go. They left Canton, arrived in Buffalo in September, and then 2 days later, her husband was shot. He died 8 days later. This one's a bit weird, right? Because she doesn't actually state, she just feels like there's danger, but that could just be over paranoia.
Well, yeah, I mean,
she doesn't say, "Oh, if we go there, then you're going to get shot," and you know what I mean? She just says, like, she felt, okay, so she felt it was where it happened.
Yeah,
but
she just
again,
had a bad feeling that something was going to happen.
But bear with, because at the end of the day, she said all she said was, "I wish we were not going away from home." That's all she recorded, and so that could be just be because she enjoyed her time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Circumstantial, isn't it?
One. She just seems to me, I don't know, overprotective or something. I mean, you know, sure, you can understand if anyone's elected president, you know, there would be sort of their spouses would be a bit concerned about the welfare, you know, because you're in quite a high profile job. But she just seemed to worry and faff around the whole time that he was president, and even before.
Mm.
Bit overprotective. I
Mm.
don't know.
It's a difficult one to pin down on that one, really, isn't it? I mean, there's not. I don't know what to say really about that one.
No, as she said, it was just. I think she's protective, and she had a bad feeling something was going to happen, and it did. Just coincidence.
But you do have accounts of people that have bad feelings about doing something. They don't, and then they survive. I mean, there's accounts of that with the Titanic, isn't there? People who were supposed to be on the Titanic didn't go because they had a bad feeling about it. And I can't remember the people off the top of my head, but there was people that happened with, and obviously, thank God they didn't. They were thinking, "Whoa, lucky escape on that one." But that feels all too Final Destination to me.
It does a bit, doesn't it?
But then maybe that's where they got the inspiration of the film from. These kind of encounters, not these particular encounters.
Very possible.
So, let's move on. In 1923, Edith Wilson, she'd actually been out of the White House now for 2.5 years. She managed to help craft a false front for the public that her husband, the president, had been suffering from nervous exhaustion. Right, he'd been returning from cross-country speaking tour by train. He'd actually suffered a huge stroke, a big debilitating stroke.
Right.
So keeping him as rested as possible while working with the physicians, she managed to successfully manage his presidency by approving routine matters and maintaining the myth that he was still going, right?
Yeah.
She managed to get him out of the White House alive, and his successor, Warren Harding, was sworn in. She knew how fragile her husband was, and her grave concerns for his survival were only intensified. And then all she said was it was an overwhelming, something ominous was hanging over them. Right, so she had this overwhelming feeling. She went to bed. She was only there a couple of hours. The First Lady was soon awakened by the cries of newspaper boys on the street who shouted out that President Harding had died.
Okay.
Curiously, on the afternoon, Edith Wilson was with the First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt. Roosevelt pops up all over the place, doesn't she?
Yeah, it does a bit.
And they made a joint appearance at the fundraising tea at the Soulgrave Club of Washington. While she was actually seated beside her predecessor, a butler whispered to Mrs. Roosevelt that a caller coming from the White House asking that she return there at once. Now, Eleanor Roosevelt never claimed she had the power of extrasensory perception, but she did state that she had a bit of a foreboding about that one.
Right.
So now, bearing in mind, the American and Allied military forces were tightening their grip on the on that part of it during World War II.
Yeah.
On two fronts, they were sort of moving together and they were closing the gap. Yeah. Any more military moves being made would they'd already set in motion what needed to happen, so they couldn't do anything else because it would have disrupted this and could have proven quite disastrous, really. Now, she visited 10% of the US armed forces stationed in European and Pacific bases, and she was acutely conscious of that wartime death. She kept up with the fate of all of her friends and relatives' sons, and she was always fearful that one of them would have been reported dead. Yeah, now she also had her own 4 sons on active duty at the front, so that's a mindset. When she was called from this tea back to the White House, she's used to foreboding feeling whenever she's hearing news because of death, but this is something different. She said, I got into the car and sat with clenched hands all the way to the White House. In my heart of hearts, I knew what had happened. So she already knew what was happening.
Yeah.
And that's when President Roosevelt had died.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now, Eleanor Roosevelt was said to have consulted the famous Indianapolis palm reader Nellie Meyer.
Mm-hmm.
Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, isn't it? The other way around. She threw rune stones and consulted the I Ching.
All right.
Okay, that's quite well, that's actually an ancient Chinese text. I don't know how they read that. I've looked into that a little bit and it's quite confusing, but I suppose it's one of those you have to study and study and study and study.
I would have thought so. Andy would know that.
I Ching is very complex, but they say that that's more likely to offer specifics.
Right.
Okay.
Well, put it this way. If you read the zodiac columns in a newspaper, don't, because they're so generalized.
Mm-hmm.
If you have your personal astrology done, that's a completely different ball game. I Ching is a form of divination, incredibly complex. And if you read it right, it's quite uncanny.
Right.
Okay.
So it's like the next level up. Do you know what I mean? You when you talk about astrology, don't think about star sign astrology because it's so general in the newspapers and the media. But if you went to an actual astrologist for you personally, then that would be more specific. And I Ching is incredibly specific.
Yeah.
And she liked runes as well. You know, because she thought that President Kennedy had an ancestry that linked to the Celts, which is where rune came from.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so that's why she thought she liked the runes because she thought it linked into their heraldry.
Yeah.
So, you know.
But the Kennedys were an Irish family anyway.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
Eisenhower used to have her tea leaves read.
All right.
And it was predicted that her husband would go on to greatness.
He was in Hufflepuff then.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Ah?
What?
Hufflepuff. That's
Harry
Harry Potter.
Yeah, that's all right. He goes on to greatness.
Honestly, now is not a good time to be throwing things at me like that, sweetie. It really isn't. I was like, what? I don't think where's that? I was thinking, where's that in front of me? Jeepers.
Oh dear. Like to keep you on your toes.
Right, let's talk about astrology, being as you brought it to the table. What's I'm a Sagittarian. What are you guys?
Capricorn.
I'm a Taurus.
Oh. Do you subscribe to your horoscopes, your star sign?
No, never check it or whatever. No.
Do you, no, maybe not check it, but do you like say personality traits of Taurus?
I wouldn't know.
Yeah, apparently I do.
Apparently I do, my Sagittarian as well.
Yeah, but I see.
Apart from the travelling bit.
I don't.
Oh, I like that.
I come up with a theory ages ago that really your star sign should start from when you was created, and you was created 9 months before you was born. So I said to a friend of mine, actually, I said this theory, and they're like, "Oh, what rubbish! It's obviously when you're born, that's your star sign." So I said, "Okay, so read my star sign." So she read it, and she said, "Yeah, that's so you." And I said, "Right, okay, well, let's go back 9 months, work out what I would have been 9 months ago." She read it and she said, "Actually, yeah, that sounds like you as well." So, well, there you go. Proves my point, doesn't it, really?
I think the problem with, like I just said, the problem with newspaper astrology is it's so general, right? You could probably read several of the different star signs and it all relate to your situation.
Yeah.
This is where you've got confirmation bias.
Yeah.
Going on. You read it, you think, yeah, that relates to my circumstance at the moment, or you know, it's like, oh, today you're going to have this and this go on. Do you know what I mean? And at the end of the day, you think, oh, yeah, that did happen. It probably, you could make it fit.
Yeah.
Basically, you could make it fit. But when you have your personalized astrological chart mapped out for you, it is very specific. Now, it's interesting you say about the moment of creation. because in Korea they do it from that point.
Yeah.
Whereas majority of all others, it is the transition from the womb to the physical reality. You become your person. You actually are birthed into your person at that point of birth.
Yeah.
And that's why they take it from that moment. Now, if you're
See,
ever
I do get it, but at the same time, you know, as the baby is growing, you can, you know, even if you play music and have the speakers on the bump, you know, the baby will move to it, so it's aware. But for the first 9 months of its life, it hasn't got a star sign.
I don't disagree with what you're saying, but people that have had their cosmological influences, should we say, read, and bearing in mind when you get a personal astrological chart, you're normally asked for your time of birth, because then they look at how the stars were set at that exact moment.
Yeah, that's right.
And even a few minutes out can change the lookout on. I was going to get the boys done, actually. I never did, but I was actually going to get my boys, astrological charts done, because to get a proper one done, it's a complex science of looking back of where the stars were at that particular moment in time for you, and to read them, and then it's separated into houses. I'm not an authority on this. The sky is then separated into houses, and depending on what astrological star constellation is where it sits in the star, and then you've got the movement of the planets within that. There's a lot to it.
Oh yeah, of course there is. Yeah,
there's a lot to it. It is actually very complex. The same as I Ching is very complex as well. I love these divination methods, not so much astrology, but I do. Can't believe you managed to get me to talk about bloody astrology, Paul. But divination methods, I do quite like. Clever, sneaky. I'd go more with Richard, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I'd go with sneaky.
Drop that one in there.
The Chinese put a great deal on their, like it's the animals, isn't it? I'm a rooster, by the way. Year of.
Oh, year of, yeah. I wondered what you were going on about then.
Yeah, it's like the year of.
Yeah.
And each year is a sign. But
I
each
wouldn't
animal,
know what mine is. I've been told once or something, but I can't remember.
I'm the dragon.
I'm not really that bothered with it, to be quite honest.
But each animal assigned that year, then it breaks down to another facet, because like, so you might have like a metal pig, the year of a metal pig kind of scenario, or a water dragon, or a they assign an element to the animal as well. Most of the Western side, we go, oh, it's the year of, I think it's the bull this year. I've got a feeling it's the bull. I could be wrong on that. Brain fart, can't remember off the top of my head. But like, so it won't just be a bull, it'll be an element linked to the animal as well. So it makes it a bit more complex than what we think in the Western society. So anyway, going back to what we're talking about tonight, there were some first ladies that did use their horoscopes, took it quite seriously, but their reliance was never leaked to the public. But there are two particular spouses who apparently strictly adhered to the messages that the Zodiac gave them through their personal astrologers, not newspaper Zodiac. Yeah. Now, unfortunately, this was released to the press, and the astrologers went fully public. What made the accounts of their horoscope consultations all the more relevant and intriguing was that both Florence Harding and Nancy Reagan used it as a tool in their impulse to not only protect their husbands, but attempt to guide their presidencies in a successful manner. Now, I have heard that Hitler was supposed to have done this as well, but I don't believe that's true.
I don't think that's true. I mean, he didn't have a very good, even though some of his outer circle, well, his inner circle, did dabble in the occult, some quite seriously as well. I mean, Hitler never really took it. He used to make fun of them, actually.
Mm.
So, yeah, I very much doubt that Hitler would consult astrologers.
Well, he might have had more success if he had.
Don't tell him that, though.
Well, no, obviously. It's interesting to me that they would make any form of decision off the back of an astrological reading.
Mm.
I mean, I've always been told, on my knowledge would always be, and I would always advise this, it's a guide. It's not something you should make a decision on. Because even with tarot, you know, like when you do a tarot reading, you have to put it out that this is just a guidance. Do not make any decisions off the back of this, and you're not responsible if they do, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it surprises me that they do that. Having said that, Nancy Reagan, her husband was shot.
Yeah.
So if she was using astrological influences, maybe she didn't read hers that day.
No.
Or his.
Yeah, probably not.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Now, Florence Harding, who we've talked about earlier, yeah, she was very into the occult. Very into it. She read about it. She believed in evil spirits and curses. She believed she had links with German immigrant families that rented farmlands owned by her father in the region. And they kept hex signs on their barns. You can still see them sometimes in the UK on barns.
Oh yeah, and yeah, particularly in America, in around the Pennsylvania area, where they had a lot of the Pennsylvanian Dutch still do it actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so she's linked to all of this. Now the Harding home claimed that, like where the Harding home is now, it's caretaker obviously. She attended a spiritualist camp, which we talked about that earlier, and her campaign secretary revealed how superstitious she was, even in minor details. She actually got a bit agitated if a maid placed a pair of shoes on the bed. She thought that would provoke bad luck.
Oh right, yeah. Well, you get superstitious people, don't you?
I mean, we have looked at superstitions before. When I think that particular superstition for her, that actually it's an actual British superstition, started as in Wales, the Welsh area.
Yes, it did.
And it's to do with the miners.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
And they believed that, well, when they laid the bodies, if you unfortunately died, a miner died, in the old days they used to lay them in the house, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And his shoes would be put next to him on the table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where the sayings of "don't put new shoes on the table" comes from.
Because it's tempting fate.
Because it tempts fate, exactly. And have you ever had a situation where you've tempted fate and it's happened?
No.
Not really, no. I can't think of anything offhand.
Or a situation where many a true word is spoken in jest?
Yeah, there's that, yeah.
I have that quite a lot.
Mm.
I actually foretold where my flat would be, and I was living with somebody at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, oh, if it all goes wrong, and I said something like this, I said, if it all goes wrong, I'll just have one of them flats.
Mm.
And I was joking. I wasn't actually being serious. And then it did all go wrong, and I did end up buying one of those flats. Yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Oh dear, maybe I shouldn't jest too much. Many a true word, right? But could you call that premonition?
Why not? Let's go for it. Call
Yeah,
it.
let's go for it.
The funny thing is also the day before, I was talking to a colleague, and I'd said, and she was talking about her relationship, and I said, "Oh, don't worry, it'll be me and my partner next," and it was literally within 24 hours. I was like, "Fucking hell, I'm good at this crap." Oh dear. Oh, gotta laugh, haven't you? Otherwise you cry. But that's where I think Harding's belief came from about the shoes on the bed.
Yeah.
That superstition came from. Now her niece Louisa recalled how her aunt would gaze up at the sky and be able to identify the constellations and what aspect of life they could be relied upon. So she was reading the stars effectively, meaning, I mean, at this moment in time, right, this particular exact moment in time of when we're recording the show, yeah, we have got so many astrological influences going on. It is freaking mayhem up there, right? And it is wreaking havoc, allegedly, across many people's lives, right?
Yeah.
And when you read about what the astrological influences should be, or not should be, but would be if they manifest in your life, it is relevant. It's not that it is going to cause this kind of problem, it's going to cause that kind of problem, and it is causing this kind of problem and that kind of problem. I'm hearing so much relationship issues going on with so many different people at the moment. It's scary, actually, because it's bringing all past hurts and all past issues to the surface that need to be resolved. So it would make sense that it would then have an effect in relationship issues, and that's because we've just had a eclipse.
Yeah.
We're in the zodiac sign of Scorpio, so it's called a Scorpio eclipse. We've got Mercury in retrograde.
Good old Mercury in
Good old Mercury
retrograde.
in retrograde, which causes enough havoc when it's all by itself, but coupled with this eclipse scenario that's going on. Honestly, when you read about that, it's absolutely bonkers, crazy. And it is relevant. So maybe there is something to the stars.
Yeah.
Mm.
Definitely.
Maybe there is. Maybe it's all bunkum and absolute crap. But, who knows? But these, she used to read the stars and actually kind of believed that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big coincidence if it is rubbish.
She would divine from these formations. That's how she did her divination, from star watching.
Yeah.
It was part of her existence that she needed this thing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, she did have a huge amount of psychological abuse and an uncertain lifespan because she actually had a potential kidney condition. Yeah. Sorry, a potentially deadly kidney condition. So when you look at psychological influences there, right? You've got this condition that could kill you at any time, right? She's had a lot of psychological abuse. You do look for signs external of self. Do you know what I mean? To help guide you through your life, I suppose. I don't know.
Well.
But she did. That's what she thought. Now, when you look back on that, a lot of generations, idealized Warren Harding. He had a lot of shortcomings, and used her occult interests, and as I said before, kind of made her like a caricature because of that. And said that she was the unstable burden on him. But people do kind of think it wasn't all bunkum, it was quite a lot. They tried to destroy a lot of the evidence because if it was right and it matched well and it was documented, it made for incredibly interesting reading, guys.
Yeah.
Would do, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Do you not feel?
Yeah. It's
Oh, yeah, it would make for interesting reading.
Now, William and Florence were never ashamed of her integrating astrology into their life. I mean, put it this way, it hasn't done them bad if it got into the White House.
No.
You know what I mean? Even though that could have cost him his 1920, presidential election, she didn't. They didn't care. They didn't. They carried on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, she had a lot of different astrologers, but the biggest one was Marcia Champré.
Something like that, yeah.
And they would use crystal balls, go into clairvoyant trances, warn her about administration officials that she didn't think was thing. Then she would go and interpret the zodiac for her. And it was in the 1920 season that Florence Harding was first brought to Marcia's house by her closest confidant, the millionaire owner of the Cursed Hope Diamond, Evelyn Mckinley. Which is interesting to me because if it was cursed, if the Hope Diamond is interesting in itself, to be fair, all by itself, you want to look at cursed objects and things like that. The Hope Diamond is got to be up there.
It always comes up, doesn't it?
I mean, seriously, it is a gorgeous piece.
I bet.
I want it back. I wish I could afford it.
It'd go in your crystal room quite happily, wouldn't it?
To be fair, if I ever got my grubby little mitts on it, I'd sell it and then I'd be rich. I'd be it'd be fabulous. I wouldn't have to worry and it'd be amazing. Anyway, off of my own little daydream right there. So anyway, where was I? So yeah, she got taken. The confidant took her, the astrologist woman, first to Florence Harding. She then returned with 3 fellow wives of the United States Senate, veiled for anonymity, everybody, and presented the birthplace, time and date, details of her husband, seeking to determine the viability of him making a run for the Republic presidential nomination. And she determined that Hardy would be nominated and win the election, but at the cost of his life.
Right.
And the prediction did become a factor in Harding remaining through the primaries through the power of suggestion. But this is where it's difficult when you do divination. If you do divination, do you think you then invest in that personally? So you invest in it. So therefore, it's not a premonition anymore. You then manifest it.
You make it happen, sort of thing.
Yeah. So if I said to you, Richard, you're going to win the lottery, and you go, well, I don't do the lottery. I said, well, you need to because you will win it. And you've got that belief in me as a, psychic person type thing. And then you would think, oh, I better go and start doing the lottery, mate. Do you know what I mean? I'm going to win it.
Yeah.
I'll be out first thing tomorrow morning.
Off you
Get
go.
my ticket. Yeah.
If you win millions, I want a share. Just saying, I'm putting that out publicly. If he wins the lottery, I expect at least a 50% share of what he wins.
Yeah, my luck.
I'll just give you 50p.
It would just be the obligatory tenner.
But that's it, if you say to someone, oh, I definitely know you're going to win the lottery, or the scratch cards, you're definitely going to win a scratch card lottery. And then you think, well, okay, well, I don't do it, but let's go for it. And you buy, 10 cards? You're guaranteed to win. It's 1 in 5, and I think it's a winner. So they reckon the odds are.
What, for the lottery?
For the scratch cards, 1 in 5.
Oh, for the scratch card.
And
is that why people buy so many of them?
Yeah, well, yeah, but you'll still win a couple of quid, won't you?
Yeah, I suppose.
And then it's come true because you've won the lottery. It reminds me of that joke when the bloke says, "If I win the lottery, what would you do?" He said, "Well, I'd won half and I'd leave." So he said, "Okay, well, there's a £5, clear off."
Yeah, you'd have to state the amount, wouldn't you? If you won the millions, if you won the jackpot, love, I'm having half and then I'll go. You know what I mean? Now, so see, this is where you go. It's the power of suggestion that got him there and whatnot. But Harding first tipped off the National Press Corps about having consulted an astrologer. She told them that the Republican National Convention in 1920 that if my husband is elected, I can see but one word hanging over his head: tragedy, tragedy. Now, Florence remained in touch with Marcia by letter using the code name Jupiter. Now, somewhere along the line, there was a leak about the astrologer in the national press, and one of Mrs. Harding's letters signed Jupiter was actually printed. Now, she did embrace it. We've talked about this before. And this seems to be a key as well. Whenever they've sort of been outed in the press, we talked about Nancy Reagan.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. Sorry, Hillary Clinton doing that. Florence embraced it too. She confirmed her faith in astrology and made it more amusing. Do you know what I mean? So what? It's like, oh, well. So when she did it, and that's when Hillary Clinton, no, Nancy Reagan even. Sorry, I'm getting my wives muddled up now.
You
My
are
Getting
guy,
all muddled, aren't you?
getting all muddled up now. It must be dinner time or something. What's interesting to me, right? So let's stop right there. The men don't seem to stop their wives from doing it. They seem to almost encourage it.
Oh, that's because it keeps them quiet.
Really?
Yeah, they can get on and watch a telly, can't they, Them?
Misogynistic man.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a difficult one. I mean, because you would have thought if you were running for president and stuff, the last thing you'll need to hit the press is your wife's into all this woo-woo.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is how the press would treat it. But but it's a well-known, yeah. But it is in record. People like Nancy Reagan did consult astrologers. So yeah. Ooh.
Hillary Clinton is channeling the energy of Roosevelt. Do you know Eleanor Roosevelt? It's interesting to me that there's more belief in it in regard. Right. When I think of politics, not just American politics, but political people in general, I do not marry that with the esoteric.
No.
You don't. It's a complex game, isn't it? Politics.
Well, you would always feel that politics is a very worldly pursuit, isn't it? And there's no room for sort of superstition or sort of,
It is a game.
prophecy. Yeah,
I would say it's a game, but you also have got to be intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to have a good grasp of economics.
Yeah.
There's a lot of rational, cold, hard thought in there, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
Of course there is, yeah. And these people are obviously in that game. They understand it all, and they do what they can. And this is why they're voted in as president and things, because it's their job then to do that, so the normal everyday person don't have to. So they speak for us, and that's why we vote them in.
Exactly. So you would not necessarily expect them to hold any water with divination of any sort, whether it's astrological, whether it's Ouija, whether it's card reading, whether it's tea leaf reading, whether it's, you know what I mean?
If it helps them make a decision, why not?
But
They've
you
got to go
shouldn't
either way.
But yeah, true. So if something happened, right? Okay, so I'll ask the question then. So, if something bad happened in your life, would you consult a divination method to help make a decision? If you was looking at a house, for example, to buy, with your partner, would you? And you saw two properties that were absolutely beautiful, and you loved both of them. You could afford both of them. Everything else was set in place, and it was just a question of choosing between the two. This is an example, everybody. Would you use divination to make the choice?
I think it's possible. I mean, you could even toss a coin. Isn't that a form of divination?
Yeah.
People make those sort of
Chance.
choices
No,
all the time, don't they?
like that's a game of chance, isn't it?
Well,
It's
it's
like
still
gambling.
mathematical, and there's a lot of maths in science, isn't there? So it could be.
Richard, would you?
No, I mean, I've owned property in the past, and I've owned a house, but we didn't. I didn't feel the need to consult an astrologer before buying it.
No.
It was
So,
just an example.
mhm.
If you had a major life change that you
Yeah,
wasn't,
no,
would
I've
you
sort of gone
consult the
through.
tarot or
No, I mean,
whatever? I do.
I made a decision to emigrate to Australia. I mean, and that was my own decision. So, yeah.
But I mean, there's plenty of people out there that do make decisions every day, down to whether or not they pray to God for a sign, or or toss a coin. It's the same sort of thing, isn't it?
True.
That's the way I look at it, and I don't see any problem with it. It's just another tool.
Yeah.
And if it works and it helps them make that decision, but at the end of the day, if it all goes Pete Tong, then they've got to own it.
Yeah, you have to be responsible for your own actions in that.
Definitely.
Definitely. I mean, if you rely on your decision-making process throughout your life regarding, I use it more of a guidance, is what I would use it for. I wouldn't necessarily make a decision on what the tarot said. Having said that, I know too much that sometimes I don't want to know the answer.
Yeah,
Do you
but
know
I
what I
mean,
mean?
you
I
could
don't want to know the answer.
you could have this life-changing decision to make, and then say, like, I don't know, put it out to the cosmos or God or whatever you want to look at it, and just say, give me a sign. Which way should I go? And then you start looking for signs, and then you'll make your decision based on that, which again is quite a common practice. But if it goes wrong, it goes wrong. Things happen for a reason. You would have had to take that path for whatever reason.
Yeah, I agree.
You've learned something on that route.
Yeah, totally.
But as one door closes, another one opens.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that, Paul. I think sometimes even if it's the wrong pathway, we'll go with, sometimes you have to take that to learn the lesson.
Well, yeah.
To learn the right tool that will give you the next tool for your right path.
Yeah.
It might serve you well on your next pathway. Do you know what I mean? That lesson. So you've a detour. You have to take like a little cul-de-sac tour down the wrong path just to sort of learn that little bit that will give you the tools to help you succeed in the next bit, I suppose.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean?
After that little bit of epiphany, I dropped my mic. Boom.
And leaves the room, everybody. Off he pops. Bless him. On that note, I find it incredibly interesting. I you know me, spiritual baby over here. Work closely with crystals and divination methods, and I do read tarot, and I will hold my hands up. I have consulted the tarot when I've had to make major life decisions for myself, and used it as a guidance method through difficult periods of my life. I'm not ashamed to admit that. I haven't paid out for an astrologist, so I can't comment really on the accuracy of that. All I can say is that the tarot has never guided me wrong yet. It's been very interesting when I look back over my life of working with tarot, how even interpretations that maybe I dismissed because that wasn't what I wanted to hear at the time came true.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, I read stabbed in the back. It was all bad. And I was like, no, not that person. You know what I mean? No. Came true. I did not manifest that. That was actions taken completely behind my back. Do you know what I mean? I did not manifest that. That happened. Yeah. They weren't aware of that reading. It was incredibly interesting looking back. In hindsight, it's a wonderful thing though, right?
Oh,
totally.
Yeah.
On that bombshell, we've actually come to the end of the show. So last thoughts, Richard, last thoughts on this, the ghosts of the White House or the divination methods the wives used in the White House. What do we make of that?
Well, it's sort of like, the ghosts are, you can just take them or leave them, as sort of ghost stories and stuff like that, which every old building sort of has, and particularly sort of, the White House is a bit like our Tower of London, you look at the amount of sort of stories attached to that place. So, yeah,
True.
it's good. It's good. I mean, it doesn't do a place any harm. It gives the place character, if anything.
Exactly.
And as for sort of like the spiritualist side, I mean, it's sort of, the wives of the presidents who seem to have sort of taken to the spiritual side. I mean, what you got to remember is that, and a lot of this happened during Victorian times, and to consult a spiritualist, a medium, was not that uncommon. I mean, even Queen Victoria used to hold seances, so it's all pretty much a product of its time. So I can't see anything sort of particularly wrong with what they were doing. It was they were just following the trend of the time.
Yeah.
Very much so. Paul, last
I
thoughts.
totally agree with what Richard just said, actually. But the show has left me with one burning question, and it's, I wonder, over the whole period that the White House was being used, how much the American taxpayer used on seamstresses.
And on that bombshell, we have actually come to the end of the show. Don't forget, you can go over to our website, paranormalconcept.com, for links to all of our past shows, as well as blogs and our links to our books, and find out a little bit more about the presenters, us three, if you so desire. Don't forget, check us out on the socials, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and we will be back with you next week. On that note, say good night, guys.
Good night, guys.
Good night, guys.